Next thing to do is to bore this out for the vertical column. Now unfortunately, because I've had this thing sat somewhere for so long, I've got a bit of surface rust. This is the vertical column. Like I say, it's already had this spiral turned in for us and this slot, but they do recommend that you just take the rough edges. You can feel, I don't know if you can see, you can hear it, these slight rough edges. So the first thing to do is I'm going to get this on the lathe very slowly, because I can spin it round by hand, and I'm going to get all this dressed up, and then we're going to get this casting, the left hand casting, set up on the mill ready for boring this out. Okay, I've got my soft jaws set up so I don't mark this bar. And first off, just going to clean some of this surface rust up here. It's my own fault for having it sat there that long. Some people call it maturing. As far as I'm concerned, it's just bone idleness really, and just not getting around to doing anything. Lathe works better as well if you pull the emergency stop out. I have managed this time to take my tool out of the tool post, move it well enough out of the way so I'm not getting any of these in the way. Just using a bit of Scotch-Brite really to clean this up. Like I say, what I'm going to do is clean this section up first, then turn it round, hold it in there in the chuck again, and then just get a file and by hand just dress all this spiral back up and get rid of this surface rust. Right, this is a left hand casting, and I've mounted it as they've asked in the instructions, using the two bars on top of the vise. Now I've clocked my vise and found that this back jaw was about 1.5 thou lower, so I put a shim under here, under the jaw. I've tightened this down. They have a clamp on here, but I think there's enough material. I've clamped this down now, and I've clocked these bars, and that's up to 0. That's up to 0. That's up to 0. And that is 0.1 under, which is 0.5 of a thou roundabouts. I'm going to live with that. That's can't see me getting any better than that. So what I'm going to do next is get an edge finder, find the edge of these this bar, the back bar. Then it's asking you to pitch across. I think it's 1 3/8 inches to find the centre of this. Now it does actually state that, again, these centres aren't critical. It's like these centres aren't critical as long as the left hand casing and the right hand casting, sorry, are the same. Now this hole, again, it's not critical 1 3/8 inches from there. What you need to do though is to make sure you're perpendicular with this to these bars. That's the more important point, and you're flat in that plane. So we'll go and find ourselves an edge finder now, and then pitch across 1 3/8 inches and see what we look like with the centre of this. Okay, we've got an edge finder in and pitched over the centre of the back bar, and then they give you an approximation for the centre of this hole in the X-plane. Now they sell you it's an approximation because you're on castings, and I've found it to be within about 40 thou. These castings are a little bit short, but obviously they're just castings, so I've roughly run a clock round this hole and I'm approximately in the middle. I've pitched over ever so slightly this way in Y to compensate for the bit I've skimmed off there. I was round about 7 thou off the centre, and then when I'm measuring the width, the thickness across the casting here, so I've come across about 20 thou. I've still got plenty of material on there, but it'll give me more of an even bore right the way down in relation to the centre line along the casting. So next thing is to set the boring bar back up and bore this out. Right, got my boring bar in, my favourite boring bar, which is a nice 12mm carbide boring bar with a tip. This is the boring bar I did these two bars with, so I'm quite happy at using that. Got this set in there in the head, and I've also got, you can see where, should just be able to see where it comes out at the bottom there. I have a stop set that's coming up against the stop, and that for when I engage the feed on this machine, when I have the quill feed set, it'll get to that stop, spring out a drive and release itself back up. While I'm roughing out, I'm not bothered about any kind of lines coming up out of it, that doesn't bother me. DRO set, and what I do like to do is when I've clocked this up, I like to know which way I've taken the backlash out, because what I intend to do with this when I get close to size is wind it off that way and try it with the bar that's going to go in there. So I've made sure I've took the backlash out in that direction, so when I wind it back and I come back to 0, I know I've took my backlash out. A few other things I also like to do, I will turn the power feed off, so I don't inadvertently touch this. No power feed, it's not going nowhere. And also lock the gibs out. It's 2 on the X, 1 on the Y, and that's all set. I will periodically check under these bars to make sure nothing's moved, and that's ready to go. Right, that's engaged. As you can see, the fine feed automatically feeds round. Now on my machine, I've replaced the aluminium handle with this plastic handle, which has to fold away, because I've hit my head several times on the other one and it's leaving marks in my head, not this. So these are just little bits that I've done to my machine. As you can see, I'm a bit of a way off the job. I just like to have it there so I can check it. Now I'll move it close in, then engage, and it will start to pick up. Now I've already gone through with this cut and I know these high spots, so there's no noise there. And I'll traverse through to the next high spot. Just saves a bit of time, and you can feel it pick up on its own there. And what I'll do, I'll help it through. And that's when we're at the bottom, and that's going to spring back up. I'll see you back here in about an hour. Well, we're just about beginning to clean up in the bore, as you can see there. Taking off about 0.4 at a time, which I think is plenty for this. It's taken a while, but we're getting there. Well, took the final cut. This is the bar. This is the flat that is going to go, and you can see actually whoever's machined it's not machined it fantastically. But the bar does seem parallel. But when I put it down the hole, it seemed to get halfway down and trap. And on further investigation, down towards the bottom, I seem to have a slight taper, so it must have been probably wearing the tip and pushing the bar off. So rather than risk any further passes and going over size, I've gone back on the lathe and I've just rubbed this ever so slightly down, kept trying it time and time again until that is just coming level with the bottom of the base now. And as far as I'm concerned, that's in. I will check it for squareness, be perpendicular with the base as well. I'll get it on my granite surface plate later on, or I might even check it on the bed on here. But that's that operation done. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to, that is getting a bit tight. I'm going to skim the top of this now off camera, and that's that operation complete. We'll see what's next on the list.